Fairy tales might seem simple at first glance, stories told to children before bed, full of talking animals, witches, and magical forests. But Carl Jung saw something extraordinary in them. To him and his lifelong collaborator, Marie-Louise von Franz, these stories weren't fantasies at all. They were ancient maps of the human soul, drawn long before psychology had a name. Every creature, every trial, every enchanted object was symbolic of something within you, something timeless, universal and alive. Jung once told von Franz, "When you study fairy tales, you can study the anatomy of man." Marie-Louise von Franz devoted decades to studying these tales from cultures across the world, searching for their hidden wisdom. The more she studied, the more she realized something deeply unsettling. No single moral or message ever stayed consistent. For every story that told you to fight evil, there was another that told you to run. Some urged honesty at all costs. Others praised cunning lies that saved lives. One tale would say, "Endure suffering without striking back," while another whispered, "Defend yourself, don't be a fool." It was all contradictory, and for a while that contradiction troubled her. She had hoped to find one golden thread running through them all, a rule to guide humanity, a universal truth untouched by time. But instead, she found opposites: chaos, duality, stories clashing against each other like mirrors reflecting mirrors. And yet in that very tension, she discovered something profound. The contradictions weren't a flaw, they were the key. Because if life itself is full of conflict and complexity, then the stories we tell about it must be too. You're not meant to be handed one perfect formula for living. You're meant to wrestle with the opposites until you find your own way through. Von Franz called this realization the rule of contradiction. Without opposites, there could be no individuality, no freedom to choose your path, no consciousness capable of deciding who you'll become. Every time you face a moral crossroads, you're standing inside that same paradox the fairy tale spoke of, the pull between yes and no, between shadow and light. You can follow what others say is right, or you can listen for something deeper, the voice that whispers a third option, the one that's uniquely yours. But even amidst all these contradictions, von Franz found one law that stood untouched, a single truth that every culture seemed to agree on. No matter the time or place, one rule held steady: never harm the helpful animal. Strange words on the surface, but Jung saw them as pointing towards something far greater. That animal, he believed, wasn't just part of the story. It was a symbol of your inner guide, the quiet, instinctual wisdom that lives within you. To hurt it, to ignore it, or to betray it, is to lose your connection to the deepest truth of your being. And that, Jung believed, is the most important rule of life. That helpful animal you were told never to harm, it's not a creature from a distant myth. It lives inside you. It's that subtle pull, that whisper beneath all the noise, quietly guiding you when logic falls silent. In fairy tales, this creature often appears when the hero is lost, standing at a crossroads, unsure which way to go. Sometimes it's a talking fox, a loyal wolf, or a wise bird, offering guidance that seems almost irrational, but always right. To Jung and von Franz, this wasn't coincidence. The helpful animal symbolized something sacred, the intuitive voice of your inner being. Marie-Louise von Franz described it as obedience to one's most basic inner being. She found, across every culture and story she studied, that this truth remained constant. In every language and every age, there was one unbroken message: never betray the quiet knowing that lives in your depths. That instinct, that conscience, is your compass through the contradictions of life. And while society teaches you to silence it in favor of rules, religion, or reputation, Jung believed that disobeying it is the root of suffering. Your conscience, Jung explained, isn't just moral judgment, it's a form of consciousness itself. It's a deep awareness of the emotional truth behind your actions, the subtle feeling of whether something aligns with who you truly are. Sometimes it comes as a warmth, a gentle assurance that you're on the right path. Other times it arrives as tension, anxiety, or unease, warning you that you've stepped off it. It's the voice that says, something isn't right, even when everyone around you insists it is. And ignoring that voice doesn't make it go away. It just buries it beneath layers of rationalization and self-deception. You've probably felt that tug before, the moment you knew what you should do, but hesitated because it clashed with what others expected. Maybe it was leaving a relationship that looked fine from the outside, or turning down a path everyone warned you against. Jung said that conscience often demands you take that risk. It asks you to trust the whisper, even if it means walking alone. Because obeying your conscience doesn't always bring comfort. It might bring loss, misunderstanding, or disapproval. But the alternative, he warned, is far worse. When you live against your conscience, you start to fracture inside. You begin to feel hollow, dishonest, like an actor in your own story. That's why Jung called the conscience sacred. It's not just intuition, it's the bridge between your limited self and something infinite. Many cultures describe it as the voice of God, not as some external deity, but as the divine spark within you, trying to steer you toward what's true. To betray it is to wound the helpful animal, to turn against the one guide that can lead you through life's contradictions. So when Jung and von Franz spoke of the most important rule of life, never harm the helpful animal, what they meant was this: never silence that inner voice, no matter how small or inconvenient it feels, because every time you do, a part of your soul forgets the way home. But here's where it gets tricky. That inner voice you're told to trust, the conscience, the helpful animal, it's not always easy to recognize. Sometimes it speaks in riddles. Sometimes what you think is intuition is actually impulse wearing a disguise. Jung warned about this danger often. The closer you come to truth, the more subtle deception becomes. And just as there is a divine voice within you, there's also a false one, a shadow that mimics wisdom but leads you astray. He called it the false conscience, and it's the reason why discernment is essential to living by the most important rule of life. You've probably felt its presence. It's the rush to act before thinking, the certainty that flares up too fast to be true. It's that self-righteous feeling that convinces you you're doing something noble, when deep down you're feeding your ego. Jung used to say, all haste is of the devil. He didn't mean literal evil, but the kind of blindness that comes from impatience, when you mistake emotional intensity for inner guidance. The real conscience doesn't demand speed, it asks for stillness. It doesn't shout, it waits. It doesn't push you from fear, it calls you from within. False conscience, on the other hand, is seductive. It can twist good into evil and evil into good with terrifying ease. It tells you to speak when silence would heal, or to stay silent when truth must be spoken. It disguises pride as morality and fear as caution. And because it feels so powerful in the moment, you believe it's right. That's how people end up justifying cruelty in the name of righteousness, or destroying something pure while believing they're protecting it. It's the serpent in the garden that whispers, "You're doing the right thing," while quietly cutting you off from your soul. Jung said that the false conscience is the devil standing beside the true one. The two often sound alike, which is what makes them so dangerous. They both speak in the language of emotion, both carry conviction, but one roots itself in quiet awareness, the other in restless desire. To follow the true conscience, you must learn to sit in the tension without rushing toward a solution. You must let the unconscious stew, as Marie-Louise von Franz put it, until clarity arises naturally. She wrote that when a person stews long enough in the agonies of such a conflict, an inner line becomes clear. And it's that inner line, the slow, unfolding truth, that separates divine guidance from impulsive delusion. It's not an easy process. The human mind craves certainty, and the false conscience thrives on that craving. It feeds on your discomfort, whispering, "Do something now, anything." But Jung understood that moral clarity often comes only after sitting in darkness. When you resist the urge to act in haste, you allow something deeper to speak, a wisdom that doesn't argue, it simply knows. You begin to sense the difference between the voice that seeks control and the one that seeks truth, between the voice that wants to be right and the one that wants to be free. And that's why the rule, never harm the helpful animal, means more than just following intuition. It means protecting that delicate bond between your conscious self and your deeper knowing. Because if you act too quickly, too rashly, you trample that connection. You frighten the animal away. The moment you give in to the false conscience, to haste, pride, or fear, you lose the quiet voice that leads you home. Jung's warning was simple but profound. The devil doesn't always come to destroy you. Sometimes he comes to agree with you. And that's when the real danger begins. When Jung said that the devil often comes to agree with you, he meant that the greatest threat to your soul isn't the obvious evil. It's the comfortable lie. And nowhere is that lie more tempting than when it asks you to betray your own inner voice for the sake of acceptance. That's the quiet tragedy of the modern soul. People trade the truth of their being for belonging. They choose peace with others over peace with themselves. But Jung believed that each of us is born with a sacred responsibility, a personal covenant that exists beyond rules, beyond approval, beyond fear. One of Jung's closest admirers, Laurens van der Post, put this beautifully. He said that every human being has two contracts in life, one with society and one with life itself. The first tells you how to behave, how to fit in, how to earn love. But the second, the deeper contract, is written in a language only your conscience understands. It speaks in feelings, symbols, and quiet knowing. Society's contract asks for obedience. Life's contract asks for truth. And when the two collide, you face the test that defines your entire existence. Do you follow the voice within or the voice of the crowd? Most people choose the crowd. It's safer that way. The world rewards those who stay predictable, who don't question the collective moral code or disturb the social rhythm. But what the world calls safety often hides decay. Jung warned that conformity can easily become a cloak for a lie so subtle that even we deceive ourselves. You might look righteous, responsible, even successful on the outside, while deep down you know something is off. That whisper of conscience doesn't vanish. It just grows quieter, waiting for you to finally listen. And when you ignore it for too long, life starts to crumble from the inside out. It's not punishment, it's feedback. Guilt, anxiety, shame, and that constant feeling of being an imposter are all signs you've broken your inner contract. They're the soul's way of saying, you've left the path. Dostoevsky understood this deeply. His characters were often tortured not by external forces, but by the sickness of a violated conscience. He believed that disobeying it for too long creates a literal sickness of the self. You begin to rot inwardly, haunted not by the world's judgment, but by your own. Following your conscience isn't always noble or easy. It might separate you from the people you love. It might cost you relationships, comfort, or reputation. But van der Post reminded us that the discomfort of being true is still peace compared to the torment of betrayal. He wrote that even if society turns against you, that pain is a peace that passes all understanding compared to what happens when you silence your inner voice. Because once you break your contract with life itself, no applause, success, or external validation can make you whole again. So when Jung spoke of the most important rule of life, never harm the helpful animal, he wasn't talking about moral perfection. He was talking about integrity, about having the courage to stand by your inner truth, even when the world punishes you for it. To protect the helpful animal within you means to protect your connection to the divine, the part of you that knows why you're here. When you honor that connection, you live in alignment with the living order of existence. And though it might cost you temporary comfort, it gives you something far greater, your soul's peace, your inner wholeness, your quiet contract with life fulfilled.